tell you anything about the person as a potential employee that it's a good hire.
Makes them feel warm.
Yeah, it's not very loud.
Fellowship program and they're not claiming.
I think over here.
Yeah, that's one of those
Damn, my spell checker doesn't have your last name in it. Howard, should be okay for most of these. Couple are a little patchy. They're trying to stick
but I think
We should get started. We'll get started in 1 minute.
Is the viewing okay of this? Do you see okay? Do you want to dim the lights, or is this okay like this?
Good to me.
Okay.
All right, so we'll get started. I'm Wayne Miller from Duke Law School,
Dan Cantrell, Duke School of Law.
and we're going to talk about our scholarship repository and our migration to BePress's Digital Commons. We've got some expertise here. Not only do we have Ken Hirsch, who previously was at Duke Law and responsible for our earlier iteration of the scholarship repository, but we also have a representative from BePress. Oh, a couple of them. So, and I also wanted to mention that you will be holding a session on BePress tomorrow afternoon at 4?
Yep.
So if you're looking for more information about their offerings. Okay. Okay, so just a little bit of history before we dive in. We're really going to be concentrating on, I'm going to go ahead and sit down, on our current iteration of our document repository. But it was back in 2003 that we initially released a version of our repository using the open source software ePrints. And we stuffed it full of PDFs with articles dating back as early as 1951 for our faculty. Duke Law School has always had, or always since I've been there for quite a while, a commitment to open access. And we'll be hearing a bit more about that. We had a short little video with Dick Danner, who was mentioned this morning. He's the head of the library, the director of the library at Duke Law, and also oversees the information technology portion of the law school. And then finally, one of the interesting things for us was when we started looking around for other solutions than what we were using, we could look to this coalition this consortium that we're a part of, New England Law Library Consortium, I believe it is. And a number of them had at that time already gone to BePress's Digital Commons, and I think some have gone since. But there's a very interesting paper on the BePress table documenting, let's see, in this case, Georgia's decision to go to BePress. So we're certainly not the first school to make this transition, but we wanted to share our experience, and we invite questions as we go along, and comments for those of you who have experiences or questions. So this is NELCO, and those are the schools that already have most of them had repositories when we were first started looking at them. All right, we'll go forward from there. And we're going to share a little bit of Dick Danner's insight and his point of view about open access. And we'll just pull that up. That's probably fine. Okay, can you hear that? It's in the speaker.
Volume's loud now.
So at Duke, we began a number of years ago to begin publishing student edited journals on our website. We've been available in PDF and HTML as a way to better, as we always talk about, expose our faculty scholarship to wider audiences than you typically see it if it's just published in the print law reviews or even electronically in the law review. We want other people to be able to read what our faculty's done. Open access is something which tries to provide information, no matter what type it is, to a wider audience, making it freely available on the web, on the internet, electronically. It takes it outside of the usual sources where scholars are talking to their immediate peers about things, and makes it available to people who otherwise wouldn't be part of that conversation or the discourse within that discipline. So open access means that people who will benefit from having scholarly information on law or on any other subject, but don't have access to libraries, to databases, to print forms of that scholarship, if it's made freely available on the internet, those people will have access to that information, to the knowledge that's been created, and also will be more easily able to participate in conversation about developing that knowledge further. One of the most important parts of that is that open access and electronic publication makes these materials available not only in the U.S., not only in Western Europe, not only what we think about as being the developed world or the North, but also in the South, in Africa, in other places where the resources at universities are not as great as they are in other parts of the world. For a long time, been a large open access movement in law to make primary sources available on the web. Not only in the U.S., but in many other countries of the world. But those efforts, which have accomplished a great deal in breaking down barriers to the law for people who need to use it, but again, don't have access to all of the libraries and other expensive tools. The organizations that have done a lot to improve open access to primary source legal information have not yet been able to make as much headway with secondary source materials, with scholarship, with journal articles and things like this, which is where we've stepped in, and the idea there, I think, is that those sorts of materials are more likely to be made available, better made available perhaps by the institutions which produce them rather than by aggregators, such as the groups which gather together the primary source materials and make those things available. Both are needed, both are important, and it's an appropriate thing for a law school to do, to try to make its own scholarship available on a worldwide basis. What we hope to do with the repository as we expand its power and its breadth is to include not only things that are written by faculty, but also student papers. We have any number of students that do not only write for journals, but are involved in scholarship in other ways and present their papers to groups within the school and will benefit from having an avenue for publishing those as well. So we will make that kind of thing available in the repository as well, along with video and other materials that will essentially show the level of intellectual activity that takes place at Duke on an ongoing daily basis, but also makes these things more readily available than they would be otherwise.
So, when we looked at what is available out there, it started with a solution that was called ePrints. It was an open source solution, and it was very good, but we found key features that were missing. Statistics, the ability to expand beyond normal document types without a lot of customization. There are other solutions out there, there's DSpace, Fedora. Open source publishing can also do what we need to do, like Drupal or the commercial applications like SharePoint. I believe NC State has recently done a repository using SharePoint. So there's a lot of solutions out there.
You turn the sound, there's static coming over the speakers.
So, with all these different options, what we looked at were, what do we really need out of the solution, and try to overcome some of the challenges previously, such as backward compatibility. When we had a statistical package for tracking usage and access to papers, an upgrade to the core software broke that package, and it has been since abandoned by the individual who contributed it. So backward compatibility and maintaining our features moving forward was very important. And then the intermittent or self-support model, what were the limitations of that? Could we get something better? Externally hosted solutions, we did see some very good benefits from that, tailored for Scholastic Repository, the scholarships repository, a very well-defined tool that had been shown by other schools' usage that it could fit that need. So that was very important for choosing a hosted solution. You can purchase additional features kind of as budget allows. So yes, we could have done a lot of internal allocation of resources of our programming time to extend some of the solutions we had in-house or some of the other solutions like SharePoint that take a lot of customization. And then we have to maintain that over time too. So it's a very difficult balance for devoting your own developer's time versus just outsourcing it to the hosted solution provider, where you can have a specified project, specified dollar amount, and an understanding that that feature will be there in essence indefinitely. So it is compelling to say that you can add features. And I know a lot of arguments for open sourcing tools is that you're giving back to the community. In a sense, we saw that when you add a feature to Digital Commons, you are giving back to the community, not the open source community necessarily, but a large community of other law schools who are already using the Digital Commons. So it is very, very user-friendly in that sense too. And something else is also just the limited resources at this time for internal development. We're getting a lot of new questions about what can we develop in-house, what do we need to set aside as a very, very isolated project that can be handled in its entirety. And this was such a project. It doesn't leverage a lot of other components within our architecture. So it is easy to take this one component and put it into a hosted solution. Obviously, other questions about the long-term viability, reliability. Those I haven't actually listed up here because you kind of say, well, that's a requirement for even looking at a service, obviously. So is Google Docs out of beta? Well, maybe we won't use that for this, but we saw that the Digital Commons was a very robust solution, and we did have confidence in it.
Let me just jump in here at a very, for us it was a very interesting point, and Ken, you can contradict if your experience was different. Because, almost exactly because of our structure, it was difficult to allocate resources for the open source solution internally. Because even though it was very important to our mutual boss, Dick Danner, it wasn't as obvious to many members of the law school. And so there was an awful lot of pressure from the law school to expend our energies on other projects. Would you confirm?
That's right, and plus there wasn't significant open source programming skill inside the law school, and the one person who had some was busy keeping the website going.
Yeah. So what we found, it really meshed what Dan said earlier. Not only was it a question of this was something that could be isolated and outsourced easily, this was something that was kind of like the tailor's shoes, the cobbler's children's shoes. It was not getting the resources internally that it should have, in part because it was seen, I think improperly, but seen as an internal project. So a lot of law schools will have different structures, but if you're in a similar situation, you can actually protect a project by identifying it as something that needs a full allocation of resources to make it happen. And not to say that it's not terribly expensive either. We're not up here making an advertisement for BePress, by the way.
But basically, it saved time and money by moving.
It certainly saved time. It created a better platform with more resources. Saving money, time is money, but it meant money being allocated. But because of the allocation, it's a much more practical solution than trying to fit it in around the edges for us.
So, where the real work began was determining what the requirements for the system were going to be. In this type of project, you really have to spend most of your time in your preparation stage and figure out what you need. And OAI compliance was very important, obviously. We wanted metadata data harvesting. We wanted to be searchable and indexable. We wanted people to find our faculty's papers. Dublin Core metadata categories, another very important key feature. Maintaining full rights to works. Obviously, the faculty are at the Duke School of Law, and we find that they are a very valuable asset to the school. Very important to maintain forever the rights to the work, so we didn't want to lock ourselves into a system where we might be giving up some of that. Statistics, it just comes back to us again and again and again. And what happens is that to get faculty and other members to contribute, they've got to feel that they're contributing to something. And statistics was one of really the Achilles heel of the ePrint system, and some of the other open source tools also, in that statistics were not believed to be by the core development teams of these open source products a core benefit to the system. So getting by author statistics by month and rankings and giving reports to the contributors, with the authors, it was always left to somebody else to do that. And that was really a very difficult thing in our environment to really keep up that initiative for author contributions. That was very important.
And two things about that. Dick Danner does research on open access, so having a full lifespan of article accesses was really important to him. Something he was constantly after us about, continues to be after us about for our journals. And BePress gave us a platform for working in that direction, giving the full life of the articles. it also, as Dan said, it was really key to our faculty who obsess. I don't know, you can raise your hands if you know that your faculty obsess about SSRN numbers. Okay, it's a fair number of you. Ours absolutely do. And BePress gave us a way of somewhat addressing that. Now, the interesting thing about BePress is that it's actually a closed numbering system. It's not up there on the website, so you can't be looking at the next guy and say, yeah, I'm lumping in. You get your numbers monthly, I think, by standard. And so you're aware of your numbers, but it's not quite the number game that SSRN is. And so there is a little bit of conflict there yet for those who really want to see themselves in comparison to others. Now, within Duke Law School, we can get all the statistics, and we could do that number game internally. Fortunately, we've never been asked to do that by our faculty. Maybe they don't compare themselves to each other.
Can you say something about the lifespan of the articles? What do you mean, the different drafts? What's the lifespan?
Oh, the lifespan. Well, in terms of statistics, we've got numbers that go all the way back to the very beginning. We were able to import all our logs, and we'll talk a little bit about that, from 2003 forward. And so that lifespan.
I see, since you were migrating an existing system.
Yeah.
We will talk a little bit about that. We did gain better versioning under the digital commons than we had in the ePrint system, but other systems do have versioning. But yes, we'll talk briefly about that in the administration use portion. That is something that is a great benefit that we didn't get that from moving to this new platform. And another department I don't have up there, but you've got to be able to leave the system if you need something different in the future. If you want to really maintain the rights to your work, you've got to be able to take that and do whatever you want with it at a later date. Put up a second copy, migrate to a new system that does stuff that we haven't thought of yet. So it is easy to get, and we have automated full data extraction sent to us quarterly. So we will. Well, we will, yes. We're setting that up now, but that's part of the standard service. So the data does come out once you put it in. Migrating Data, Wayne had looked into the digital commons specifically as a solution and had said that you've seen a prior migration strategy presentation on this. So it was in 2008. So we had some ideas on what we were getting into. We worked with the actual data in the ePrint system quite a number of times, trying to fix little things here and there and see what it would take to extend it. So we were pretty well versed in the actual data in the system we had. How to get it out of that system into the digital commons system is, we went back and forth a few times. You can speak of that, I think.
And you guys can step in here. What we were told when we first migrated, or first wanted to migrate, was that there was an XSLT transformation available, and that's the Purdue migration that's very well documented. And there was a spreadsheet coming where you could just put all your data into a spreadsheet, and it would be handled that way. What we ended up doing, thankfully, was we were able to share, well, this is the XML that we get out of ePrints. And they were able to look at that and say, we can do that XML transformation most easily. And so that's how we ended up importing the data. Is that generally part of the package, or how would you characterize that now?
Sure. Well, you're right that we now have an Excel version of that. So typically XML would be used for huge amounts of data. Excel would be used for smaller amounts of data, but both are used equally, I would say.
Okay. So that was very useful for us. And it turned out, of course, the fields were fairly well matched, although there were little things where a real active transformation had to be undertaken on their end.
Yeah, typically we have a lot of customers doing different kinds of migrations, so we can always have a sample from another customer that's coming from a different system. And typically, a new customer can use that as a sample and sort of just adapt it a little bit.
So So it turned out that the data export was fairly painless. We had to find out how we were going to resolve multiple versions, some duplicate author entries, but overall, I think I would say 99% of our documents went over pretty cleanly, without much hassle at all.
In fact, we discovered a bunch of documents
Yeah.
that we thought, well, those shouldn't be in there.
We're actually able to find test documents and
Yeah.
a few errors that had happened over the years, but it was a pretty painless data export. Data processing was a little bit more effort. And again, this goes back to the statistics. And so we had to do quite a bit of work with finding and properly formatting, documenting all of the logs of hits that the web server had acquired since 2003. So there was quite a lot of work done. Basically, we had a large volume of actual logs in 2 different Apache formats, and then the statistical package that had worked for one version of ePrints had logged more data. So we had to basically take everything, throw it in a database, normalize it, get it to a standard format so that it could then be filtered out, removing search engine hits, and some other variables like that had to be tuned, specifically because there were different counting methods. Whereas our earliest logs were just Apache logs, and every hit got registered. The later statistical package that was built in was actually trying to filter out things like search engine hits and really give a realistic number. And then, of course, the Digital Commons has a different counting method that they've refined over the years. So it wasn't widely dissimilar than what we were already tracking, but it was different enough that there was a fair amount of just number crunching and a fairly iterative process that we went back and forth a couple times to try to figure out exactly what hits were real, what hits weren't, so that at the end of the day, we switch over and then this author says, why did half of my reads go away? So again, have to be very sensitive to the population that is contributing to this and making this a successful repository.
That first set of logs we really had the most trouble with. We had to come up with a heuristic because there was no, it was minus the agent, so there was no obvious way to ascertain which were valid hits. So we used some heuristic of how many times they, or how fast they hit different
Reverse
pages.
DNS mapping, the frequency of hits, and the
That's right, the reverse DNS.
and then the number of hits from similar sources to too broad an area. So there was a lot of work done there to try to validate the numbers that were already in the system and thus already presented to the end author, the user of the system, to really make it successful. And I think the work paid off well. I think both sides came to good terms and we came up with numbers that we can both rely on. And moving forward, the numbers are going to be tracked very similar to what we already had, so we don't expect any wide discrepancies. So final transfer of data, it was pretty straightforward. The actual cutover was easy enough because we're able to do things like DNS so that we could actually have the scholarship show up as a Duke EDU, a Law Duke EDU address. The final cutover with the refresh of data was just a simple retransfer of all changes. We were able to work with the law librarians who entered data to have a freeze out of a couple weeks so that we could easily say, okay, refresh the data, do a final consistency check, make sure everything's working right, make sure all the documents are where they need to be, nothing was lost. And then really then there was other work going on with another team, the web services team, which Wayne talked quite a bit about with the web page customization. The look and feel really a part of what we already have in the law school.
And maybe tell me if this is coming later. One of the hardest things for us, at least conceptually when we first started, is we didn't want our ePrints to just simply disappear because those URLs had been out there for years. So we wanted to do a redirection. And the simplest way was if we were able to use the same document numbers. And BePress was willing and able to do that. So the document that was 118 on our server became on document 118 in Digital Commons, so that we were able to do a formulaic redirection from our Apache server when we deactivated BePress. So that worked out very well. So school branding was key, and of course the R with our own DNS, our own domain. Probably the most interesting thing about working with BePress is we're used to having full control over everything. And so we're ready to say, okay, when can we go in and start modifying these pages? And they said, send us your design. Or tell us what page to look at, and we'll make it. And that, conceptually for me, that was difficult. But I said, all right, we'll give it a go. And it has worked out so far, which is still a surprise to me. But and maybe if everybody at this conference all of a sudden inundates them, they'll stop being so responsive. But they have been very responsive. And what we can show here are some iterative designs. You can't really see them very well, but it's a nice looking page, but it's not our page. So we kept after them. They tried something here that was creative, but not within our style guide. And so, and this is the last couple. No. Okay, and they like the blue bar on the left, but that again, that's not us. And then I don't think this is the current final version, but through an iterative process, we were able to get our basic look. Let's see. Basic look into the repository. So that's just a short little visual set of evidence showing this is very close to our look. It's a little bit different, but that seemed all right because it's different enough from the rest of our site that we didn't feel like it had to be slavishly related to the site, but it fit within our model much better than the earlier iterations. And so the process can be successful. I only suggest that if you start down this path, be ready to go through a number of iterations. Or their default look is very nice, but we really wanted something that said Duke. Okay.
And something else that we did is that the previous repository only had faculty scholarship. So we're expanding out now to, as Dick Banner said in his brief interview, was talking about that we're looking at new and more information that we want to start putting out there in the same manner in open access. So work papers, student works. Some of these are actually, the journals are actually referenced back to our internal sites. Our journal sites and centers are actually to our center sites, but you can see where this is leading. We really want to make this an accumulation of the works of the law school, try to be all-encompassing as possible.
And I'll just digress one more time. Yeah, journals, as Dan said, that goes back to our site. We've been hosting our journals for well over a decade. But we want to change that process as well. So we're now looking, as we, in a sense, we're repeating our experience with the repository for journal hosting. We're looking at what BePress offers, and they've made everything, I think everything that they do to support journals available to us. And we're also looking at the Open Journal Systems open source project, which is being advocated currently on Duke's campus for online publishing of journals. And we're going to look at those two solutions and find the right one. Obviously, BePress has an advantage for us. It's well supported. It's integrated with what we're doing. OJS has an advantage in that it's currently a Duke initiative, and may have support within the Duke environment. So we're going to be revisiting this open source versus commercial question in that smaller realm of journals.
So we talked a little bit about this already, consistency checking, having this, having sufficient time to make the process work really benefited us. Finding things like matching ID numbers for documents, having time to fully test redirection, and ensuring that we weren't going to abandon any pages, and make sure that we're fully forwarding properly the request from search engines so that we find a new location was all very important. And really it was about spending the time, taking it at a pace that would give us the time to find all of these areas throughout this process, and making sure that we did maintain the availability of the system during that time. Administration, so talked to law librarians a little bit about this, and they have enjoyed the abilities that they have in the new system quite well. I don't have papers myself, I can't speak to that, but we do have a brief interview with Melanie Dunshee, which we'll get to in a moment here, and she'll talk a little bit about how she feels the system is responding to the needs of the law school after we've been live since about the beginning of last November. So we're going on about 7-8 months now, depending on how you count it. But a rich set of features. As you saw, we have now incorporated other areas such as student work, so it is meeting some of the future needs today. We're really happy about that. Melanie Dunshee, Assistant Dean of Library Services, a few words about using it. Oh, yes. Keep it going. 50.
The main goal for our scholarship repository is to expose the intellectual output of our law school to as wide an audience as possible and to as many audiences as possible, including worldwide exposure. So the main criteria for looking at what we wanted was to have OEI compliant platform so that it could be indexed, harvested, and available in as many sources as possible. One of the limitations of things like SSRN or our prior ePrints product was that it really could only handle document-type materials. So Digital Commons gives us a lot more options that we're very interested in doing. And also, Digital Commons provides the structure for loading this material, searching it, and exposing it that is all set for you. So for instance, they have a module that supports conferences and symposia, both promoting it and having an agenda, as well as collecting the materials from it in both video and documents. So that's a really good product. Also, we're interested in including much more of the intellectual output of our law school in terms of our centers, which have a mix of media things. In this case, you could have, in one record, you could attach both the video of a speaker and also the text of his remarks and make those available to people. They also have a platform for including the student-edited journals products, including the back end that helps them track the editing of those materials. And basically, as BePress puts it, they think of the repository as basically stuff in a box. And they're very eager to help you design any kind of structure you need to put in the kinds of materials you want. We here at Duke have a long history of webcasts for all kinds of events that have taken place at the law school. And we're also interested in including all those kinds of materials to make them more available. ePrints is an open source product, which means that if you want to make it do anything, you have to have staff in your institution be able to have the time and expertise to program it and spend some time setting up forms. And this can be as simple as if you want fields that are different for an article in a book, they have to do that. It's not set up for you. So the advantage of having the product we now use is that we can rely on the expertise and a common group of users at BePress to set up those things for us and to respond to our requests. So we have a much better infrastructure for them to work on, and we can concentrate on the content. And that's what really makes it better. BePress has proven to be very flexible in working with us. to make it work like we want it to meet our needs, to make it have the kinds of fields and information display and display in the way that we want it to display. So it's really great to have this at your fingertips. The user community also has, because we're paying for this rather than open source, has a lot more sway with the company, I think, in terms of getting the kinds of things they want that are common issues and common needs. The other thing that we think is an improvement over our prior product is that there's sort of a richer metadata structure to work with. There's thesaurus, subject controlled language that we can use that extends beyond the law field, so that it's multidisciplinary. And this material is searched and used by people in political science or the humanities, and so it gives us a lot more exposure in that way. You can also add keywords, and they have, although the information is harvested by other people, so it's available in all kinds of areas, it's a nice feature also to be able to search across the repositories in a family of digital commons repositories. That also, I think, gives people a much better chance of exposure to a broader audience because of that feature.
I think one thing to keep in mind is her enthusiasm for BePress is also the flip side of the problem she experienced from our experiences with ePrints and our ability to support it at all times.
But you did hit on a couple of real important things. Being able to put more media types out there, and I think you could speak well about the increasing use of video, especially with student videos or a student video project that students created. How many videos? A semester. A lot of videos. There was a trip to Brazil with, I think, only 10 students and 1 faculty, and they came back with, I think, 60 gigs of media to then produce into shorts on the website, stills, write-ups. So more and more, we're really going to see a lot of these other media types approaching there, and being able to package things together well.
Yeah, we could throw this right at them because there's 2 things to say about that from my perspective. Number one, you don't have streaming services, but you have also expressed to us, you can confirm or deny, that there is no file size, there's no limit to the size of the repository. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we don't put a limit on how much stuff you put into the repository. There's also no limit in terms of the file size you put up there, but of course, at a certain point, most browsers crash out, so it's sort of a reasonable limit.
A functional limit, and it is also functionally limited by the fact that they're not streaming. So if you prefer a streaming platform, it's.
But I would just add to that, you can present a streamed video in your Digital Commons repository. So you have a lot of options, actually. You can upload the actual file to Digital Commons and present a streamed version of that same file in the same metadata record in your Digital Commons interface.
So you embed it.
Exactly. So it can be hosted at YouTube, it can be hosted on a local campus streaming server, so you have lots of options still today, but we do not have an embedded streaming server, you're correct.
So,
I was just going to ask if there's any kind of an editorial process at the school. I don't want to use the C word like censorship or anything, but if you're putting student work up online, I mean, most of the faculty work has been reviewed somewhat, but if you're putting student work up online, is there anything that you do to suggest that some work maybe shouldn't go up?
Could you show our page? And there's a simple answer to that. Well, the first answer is, that's the librarian's problem. The second, less flippant answer is that Digital Commons comes with the notion of collections. So you can put it into a separate collection just for student work. And then I think if you search across collections, it'll still identify the collection. Does that sound right?
identified in the search?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that it's not completely answering the question of vetting, but it does come with the notion that you are putting in different kinds of materials, which was not supported in ePrints, right?
Right.
Is there any kind of disclaimer that this work hasn't been like peer reviewed or anything like that?
Not
Let's
for
see.
us. I mean, we have not done that yet.
We do have something, it's not
Yeah.
that, but you could support that, is that correct?
You could have a custom metadata field that said exactly what you're saying. And in terms of process, I mean, it's really up to you on a collection by collection basis. Who vets the content? If there's any vetting process, the whole 9 yards. So you have a lot of granularity for who administers each collection. You could have 100 administrators of Digital Commons, each with a very tiny little slice that they have responsibility for. You could have one, right? So lots of flexibility.
And in our case, there's no way for students to self-submit material into the system directly. So from a policy standpoint, it's the maintainers of the repository that set the policy. I don't think we have a formal policy at this time for specifically that, since that's relatively new. I don't think they have formulated a policy for that.
You're like,
But it does have to go through the maintainers of the repository.
Aren't your, I thought Melanie, she was at the William and Mary conference. I was there. I thought she said she was doing all the other.
She and staff there. I think she's not doing it all herself
But
anymore.
the librarians are controlling.
Yeah,
Right,
that's
the
right.
librarians are doing all.
That's right. That's
So an author doesn't put the paper in themselves. They have to submit it through.
That is a possibility.
Correct.
It's
In our model, they have to submit it to the appropriate person to, in essence, I guess, get approval.
Well, and a big part of that too is assigning the right metadata entries to it.
To keep it useful.
But is that person who actually posts it also responsible for doing, like, for example, a law review with you and checking for legal accuracy? That hasn't been a concern for you, though.
I don't know, did Melanie talk about student
She didn't, I
stuff
mean,
with
that,
the-
honest, and that's interesting, because that didn't even come up. I mean, at that point, we were, and, some of you all were there, and a bunch of us that had D-Space, and somebody like us who had just gotten into the D-Space, unfortunately, and we didn't talk about that at all. The whole thing was we were going after faculty papers after they were already published, for the most part. And the librarians were the ones who were, so I think the assumption was, and it was mine until 10 seconds ago, that the paper was fine because it had already been through.
So this is new territory in a lot of ways.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is because we're looking right now at getting our law review up online and hoping maybe the faculty will follow suit. But there's an awful lot of good writing that is being done, but because we're basing this on a law review model, which we can only put so much in that many pages, that part has been vetted, but we have other articles that the students are writing that would be really helpful to a lot of people, particularly within the state. But, the law review doesn't have time to vet all of those. But, we also don't want to put them up there and then find out that, well, you got a real bad problem with, this proposition you made here or something like that. So, I mean, we certainly don't have the staff in the library to do that. So I was just curious to know if anyone had done across that.
I don't believe they have crossed that bridge, but I think it's right in front of us.
Okay.
I would think it's caveat emptor too. I mean, it's student papers, it says student papers, and, the stuff that's published in journals can be pretty awful too.
There have been articles about that too, haven't there?
Ultimately put, yes. And it is nice that you can separate out by collection and put a different caveat per collection, and so that hopefully will help us through that new and different way of presenting data.
Sort of like unpublished opinions or something.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to call them, read at your own risk, but I guess, yeah.
You can think of faculty sponsors, Yale would do it, they have student prize papers, so they have a number of series of student prize papers, and we also put up dissertations.
We've got a disclaimer that the university council signed off on. It is the front page, literally on the front page of every student work that we've got.
Really?
Out on the internet.
I'm sorry, what's?
Wake Forest.
Wait for it.
At Wake Forest. I mean, literally, library director wrote it, everybody batted around, and then literally it went to the university general counsel's office.
Good.
Otherwise, though, system support is pretty easy. We're requesting support resolution for minor issues, pretty straightforward. We haven't really run into any major roadblocks, outages, so we're really happy about that. Future improvements are coming at a good pace. And again, as more law schools use the digital commons specifically, any features that we request are pretty much immediately available to other law schools. So there seems to be a building wave within the digital commons for our purpose, which is very good also.
Any digital commons users here? They've already drunk the Kool-Aid.
I can announce 2 new ones just within the last 2 weeks. Fordham just came on board, and St. John's now has contract in hand. So
The reason why I ask is that I've discovered there's this new rhythm of the quarterly announcement of the features that are coming, which kind of have to get used to. Quarterly is good, lots of features that, but I'm sure they all have been requested by someone, so you get the automatic benefit of others' insight, which is true for all software development.
Feature direction, we've talked a lot about this already. What new media types, and another big one that we've got to look at moving forward is accessibility. That's actually still a pretty heated debate between PDF and HTML. So we like that we are sticking to pretty good standards today, with the ability to put multiple types of documents in a single record. In essence, it does further our ability to grant accessible documents to individuals. So there is some benefit there too that shouldn't be overlooked. And then QA, we talked about some of these questions already, but as a hosted solution more expensive, it's hard to tell what the time cost would have been if you had gone out and taken DSpace and customized it, or any other tools out there. But I think Wayne covered that one quite well. And what format is future-proof? We're looking at trying to figure out what format should video be in. Everyone's pretty happy with HTML for its longevity, its accessibility. PDF, people love it because it looks the same always. Next question is, what do we do about video?
Betamax.
It's all on our HD DVDs.
Any other questions?
Yes, questions. We got a few minutes left.
Yeah, I actually had a question about I guess more the design or the integrating this with Duke's website presence. So I gathered that, essentially this was a sort of finished package or a finished presentation, not something that provided a back end and then, you had your own HTML, CSS
That's correct.
So, did you send wireframes back and forth and essentially design the spec, or?
I mean, you saw those were the actual images that they sent us as they were working, and then we had a test site we went over pretty extensively before it was made available, and there was a lot of back and forth to get their kind of starting point in sync with our.
So that sounds sort of at once possibly even advantageous at the starting point, but then my concern would be, it's a big branding change for your university, or that sort of maintaining a sort of coherence. Both navigationally and the sort of visual branding kind of stuff, that poses sort of another separate thing to bring on board.
So BePress will, do upgrades to your look and feel of your digital commons site. Not every 6 months, right?
Right.
Because it is a lot of work. And it's happened probably, 3-4 times or so over the course of the last 2 years. And I'd say those customers probably had the same look and feel for 18 months to 2 years, and then did some sort of major change.
But it's certainly a step to take after you've got your look and feel nailed down.
Of course.
Yeah.
I would just add that on average, our new adopters of digital commons, it takes roughly from the time they sign the paper, right, to going live with what you see here. The average is about 3 weeks. Okay, so it's a very different experience from the open source customization route and local hosting and all that. It gets going very quickly in the grand scheme of things. And as the video said, our goal is to help you all focus on the content, right, and providing services to your constituents on campus, rather than spending lots of time coding and programming and all that sort of thing. So that's why we're in business.
How do you address any confusion that might arise between SSRN and BePress? Is it just sort of everything goes everywhere? Finals go to BePress? Has that been an issue?
It is an issue. And for a while, we had an SSRN series. We had, I think, 2 BePress series. And then we also had ePrints locally. And I think as part of this review, we decided to dump the SSRNs. Series, I guess it was the series that other people can get the summary of it, because it was so expensive. And I can't remember if we're still doing the BePress ones or not. We still put stuff on SSRN for our faculty. It's just that it's not.
The working papers or public policy series?
I'm not even sure where. I should have looked before this. But, so we still continue to help the faculty take advantage of these other systems. But we've always seen this as a separate commitment. And you heard Dick. And he thinks it's really important that the faculty of an institution be represented fully. And in the same way, he argues for public access to our journals. And our faculty, I think there are some, if they stop to think about that, say, you're watering down my SSRN numbers, stop it. But most of them just like the idea that access to their scholarship is taken so seriously.
If you didn't belong to NELCO, do you think you would use BePress?
I think that was certainly a nudge, but it wasn't so much that it was a deal maker or breaker. There was a consortium involved. But other than that, I think we probably would have done this. We have I was going through my email. We have the longest possible history talking to BePress people, Dick mostly, and because we've always had our journals online, etc. So we've always been watching what they've been doing, and this was an obvious moment in time for us to take seriously the promise of a hosting solution.
I just wanted to throw something out. I've talked to a few law schools as well as some folks at BePress, and one of the things that we're looking at here with Tom and LII and some other folks is trying to get some sort of count system that would be out there regardless of where your paper is. So right now, I think it's true, all the professors, they really care about their SSRN number. They think that's what's going to be the tenure, citations, and everything else. And what happens is they don't want to put their papers anywhere else. They say, just put on SSRN. I didn't want to put it on my own homepage. But if we can set up a system where we get counts wherever they are, BePress, the local, archive in the school, any place, and we can sort of aggregate all those numbers into one overall number. I think what you'll see is the professors instead of going saying, I just want an SSRN. I want it everywhere, because wherever it gets downloaded, I'm actually going to get a count. It would greatly increase the distribution, allow the law schools really to sort of set up their own brandable archives like they do at BePress in different places, which help on the fundraising and different things like that when you're approaching different outside lawyers and trying to get them to help fund something. So there'd be a lot of things that would be very positive there, and I think it's really just the the law schools and some of the IT departments working together and sort of standardizing some sort of counting system or some sort of measuring system, and then getting some sort of trusted source, whether it's LII or maybe CALI or some group, sort of to be the certifier of these numbers. And then you can do all types of things. So you could say, here's how many people are downloading from .edu sites, or here's how many people are downloading from law school sites. We know the IP ranges for most of these places. Because if you just want basic numbers for downloads, you can just optimize for Google. That's pretty easy to do. Which SSR actually encourages by trying to get you to link to all your articles, where your blogs are and things like that. So that's just something that's sort of coming up, and I think that will be helpful actually with getting some of the professors to see sort of a bottleneck from moving off SSRN involved and actually encouraging these sort of distribution mechanisms.
Interesting. Okay. We're at time, so thank you for coming.
Good for them. I was sick of my life. The developers just I looked at it the other day just to see what was going on. There apparently is now a specific package, but I have no idea.
Well, I got a marketing email from BePress saying, please come work.
Oh, mailing an answer.
Give me 20 years.
Interesting final comment there about
You know, people do that. It's called cat trap. Collapse. I was going to say, I think very well made. It's already there. You have to put it overnight, so they say, let's use this one. It's there. Coming to Princess. Future program. Coming to
So you're next, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is like law school. I have no idea what the rest of the conference holds. Look at the papers.
Is that where
That's what it is.
That's what I thought that was
Right, but they did that loss of educational technology school last year, I put 10 minutes. So, I missed that. Dr. Cruz is starting to come some of the last sessions. Please come.
Your name next turn around.
Asked me to bring it to the
Well, we have a John Hopkins.
Read more.
You look at some of the stuff that you forgot.
Well, that's why I got
Trying to account for millions of dollars and stuff a year, and it was well baked out. You just have to pick base game and say, from this one.
We'd have to get SSR.
That's the big part.
I don't think you have to, because I think SSRN will follow, if they need to get the numbers in, they'll do it. And so
You start everywhere.
There'll be market demand to put on them.
you get all the school systems doing it. They do it, you start putting the meetings up on the schools sites, and you can grab the SSRN basic numbers right now, so they can be published. Just do it like that. And then somebody say, you guys really need to pick it up. And if the SSRN does a horrible job optimizing,
facilities, training people and everything, but they do
Our librarians who were doing the lateral hire research, when they were looking at the papers, but they were good.
Every click
They were
goes, and more importantly, where it came from.